I never thought I'd find myself sitting across from my only daughter and her husband at the dinner table, feeling utterly and completely peripheral to my own family. The lighting in their newly renovated dining room, a renovation I had quietly funded, was soft and golden. Catching the sheen of Andrew's expensive watch, as he gestured wildly, the laughter was easy, the clinking of wine glasses rhythmic. Yet, to me, the atmosphere felt brittle, like thin ice stretched over a deep, cold lake. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. I had spent my life building things that endured. As an engineer, I valued structure, integrity, and long-term sustainability. I applied the same principles to my family, working hard so that Caroline could have a foundation of stability I never enjoyed. When Andrew came along, a young man brimming with digital age confidence, I saw a new kind of energy. I thought I was investing in my daughter's future by providing a seamless transition for them, smoothing out the rough patches of early married life, a little help with the mortgage here, the kids' tuition there, a safety net. I told myself, a temporary boost. But somewhere along the way, that net became a hammock, and the boost became life support. Andrew, my son-in-law, sat at the head of the table, presiding over the meal like a benevolent monarch. He had recently landed a highly lucrative executive role, and his success was not just discussed, it was performed. He was a study in polished, superiority-tailored shirt, sleek haircut, and a posture that declared he was, finally, one of the people who mattered. He swirled the deep red Cabernet, looking at me with an air of patronizing pity that was becoming his default expression. Retirement must be nice. Samuel, he started. The question, not really a question, but a veiled dismissal. No pressure. No deadlines. No real responsibilities. Just puttering around the garden, maybe fixing a leaky faucet. You've earned it, I suppose, but it must be strange to go from building things to, well, coasting. His words sliced right through the pleasant hum of the room. It wasn't the words themselves that stung. I knew the value of the bridges and buildings I'd contributed to. It was the tone. It suggested I was irrelevant, a footnote to the modern world. He and his six-figure salary now dominated. Caroline tried to intervene, her voice tight. Dad's work is still standing. Andrew, those are permanent structures. Andrew just offered a dismissive wave of his hand, a gesture I recognized as pure contempt. Sure, they're permanent, Caro, but they're a relic. The world moves at the speed of data now. Not blueprints. Only young, agile minds truly succeed. Honestly, Samuel, you were left behind in the last century. The true venom emerged when he began his sermon on financial meritocracy. It's different now that I'm making real money, he continued, leaning forward. It's important that people pull their own weight. We can't have dependence. You know, the difference between people who provide and people who just exist. He didn't need to look at me for me to know exactly who he meant. People who just exist, that was me. The man who had secretly paid his premium car lease. The man who had quietly ensured their children never had to leave their prestigious private school. The man who kept the bank from calling about their mortgage, a man he considered a washed-up, superfluous remnant of the past. The humiliation was a hot, bitter taste in my mouth. But it hadn't turned into anger yet. It was still shame. Shame for allowing this narrative to take root. Shame for enabling his arrogance through my own silent financial handouts. Then, my granddaughter, Emma, the sweet, oblivious soul of 8 years old, piped up, trying to steer the conversation back to safety. But Grandpa Samuel built my treehouse. It's the strongest thing ever. Andrew forced a short, sharp laugh and clapped her on the head, a gesture both patronizing and final. That's nice, sweetheart, he said, fixing his gaze squarely on me, his eyes hard and cold. But real men provide. They don't just build flimsy structures, they build financial empires. They don't coast through life, waiting for others to carry them. That was the breaking point. His arrogance had not only dishonored my life's work, but had also weaponized my love and generosity against me. I felt the shame recede, replaced by a crystalline, cold rage that brought a sudden, absolute clarity. I saw the truth. I hadn't been helping them. I had been suffocating their ability to grow, nurturing a parasitic entitlement in Andrew, and by extension, in Caroline's compliance. I put down my fork, the small clink on the porcelain plate, sounding like a gunshot in the suddenly silent room. He met Andrew's eyes, no longer retreating, no longer invisible. My voice, when I spoke, was low, steady, and cut through the atmosphere with the surgical precision of a final verdict. Andrew, I said, leaning in just slightly, letting him absorb the full weight of my presence. How does it feel to know that this failure, the one you think is just coasting, will no longer be paying your bills? The smug grin dissolved instantly. His face went pale, a mask of bewilderment and sudden, naked panic, replacing his pride. The sudden realization of what my words meant, the immediate loss of his hidden financial scaffolding, hit him like a physical blow. I didn't wait for an answer. I pushed my chair back, the harsh scrape on the wooden floor shattering the remnants of the evening. I looked at Caroline, whose eyes were wide with a mix of terror and dawning comprehension, and then I simply walked away, leaving the wreckage of the dinner party and the wreckage of their entitled life behind me. The silence I left in my wake was deafening. The storm, I knew, I had just begun. The silence of my own home, a minute later, was a balm compared to the corrosive atmosphere I had just left. I didn't just walk away from that dinner table. I walked away from a lie, a comfortable, expensive, suffocating lie that had wrapped itself around my family for 15 years. Andrew's words, failure, coasting, dependent, were still ringing in my ears. But they no longer hurt. They had become the cold, sharp focus of my engineering mind. If the structure is rotten, you don't patch the cracks. You expose the foundation. I went straight to my study. The room is a sanctuary, filled with blueprints, technical manuals, and the heavy, satisfying scent of old paper and leather. Against one wall stood a filing cabinet, the repository of my career and my meticulously managed personal life. I didn't hesitate. I pulled out the deep bottom drawer labeled simply C&A, contingency. I am an engineer. I don't deal in approximations or sentiment when it comes to integrity. Every payment, every wire transfer, every discrete check had been documented. The files were color-coded, labeled with the precision I applied to calculating load-bearing walls times Blue Tab's mortgage assistance. The monthly payments I had secretly matched to keep their dream home from foreclosure during Andrew's less than stellar years. Asterisk green tabs, vehicle financing. The sleek BMW Andrew drove, the one he boasted about buying, was largely paid for by quarterly deposits disguised as investment returns. Asterisk, yellow tabs, education and insurance. Every dollar for private school tuition. Every high-premium health insurance bill. Quietly settled before they even saw the invoice. Red tabs, miscellaneous. but often the most crucial: emergency medical bills, tax shortfalls, and the occasional bailout from a poorly managed credit card. I spread the folders across my large wooden desk, the sheer volume of paper a testament to my obsession with ensuring Caroline's comfort. I began the task of summation. It was a cold, necessary ritual, like performing a post-mortem on my own generosity. I pulled out my old ledger, the heavy one I used for structural analysis, and started adding. The mortgage support numbers hit first, month after month, year after year. Over 15 years of propping up a luxury property they couldn't afford. The number ballooned past $540. Ling, ling, ling. My hands were steady, but the knot in my stomach tightened. Next, the cars. 2 SUVs. The BMW Ibaishumeyan. 0, gone. Simply to maintain the illusion of Andrew's professional success and Caroline's comfortable suburban status, the yellow tabs tuition, medical were the most sickening because they were the ones I felt least guilty about. They were for the children's security, my grandchildren. Yet, even those were a source of codependence. They never had to budget for the most basic necessities of life. I had stripped them of the pressure to prioritize. The total here was enormous, pushing the entire running tally towards a chilling milestone. When I finally finished, the single, terrifying number stared back at me in the harsh light of my desk lamp: $976. Lambe. Nearly $1 million. My entire retirement cushion. Not just spent, but poured into a void created by their willful ignorance and Andrew's aggressive entitlement. It wasn't just the money. The real revelation was the depth of their dependence. They were so utterly insulated from financial reality that Andrew, the beneficiary of my silent subsidy, felt emboldened to preach to me about the value of earning one's keep. I hadn't built a safety net. I had built a luxurious cage. I hadn't invested in their future. I had bought their perpetual adolescence. The money didn't just pay their bills. It bought my invisibility, my silence, and my role as a punching bag for Andrew's misplaced ego. My hands clenched around the ledger, the heavy leather digging into my palms. The anger was no longer cold. It was a righteous, burning heat. I realized that my own fear, the fear of seeing Caroline struggle, the fear of not being needed, had made me the ultimate enabler. I had loved them with money, and in doing so, I had nearly destroyed their capacity for independence. Looking at that nearly $1 million figure, I knew the cost of my decision. It would be painful. It would be devastating for them. But the alternative, continuing to fund their corrosive delusion, was a betrayal of everything I believed in as a father and as a man of integrity. The numbers were no longer just digits on a page. They were the evidence. They were the irrefutable case for the immediate, surgical termination of all aid. My resolve solidified into granite. The lesson would be brutal, but it was the last, most important structure I had left to build for them, the structure of their own self-reliance. And I had to tear down the old foundation first. The sun rising over the blueprint-strewn desk didn't bring hope. It brought the cold, analytical focus of a demolition engineer. The nearly $1 million I had tallied was no longer a number. It was a mandate for immediate, surgical action. I couldn't afford sentimentality. I was operating on a cancerous growth of dependency, and any hesitation would only prolong the pain. I didn't sleep. I sat there in the pre-dawn, quiet, my hands steady, my mind devoid of emotion, moving from the ledger to the computer with the methodical precision I used to calculate the tensile strength of steel. The first order of business was to dismantle the most visible and comforting structure of their illusion. I started with the blue tabs, the mortgage assistance. I logged into my banking portal. The wire transfer, disguised as a periodic investment dividend, was set to automatically clear on the first of every month. I navigated to the payment schedule and hit the cancel function. A dialog box popped up. Are you sure you want to terminate this recurring payment? I confirmed the action without blinking. I even went a step further, calling the mortgage company's automated line to ensure the cancellation was immediate and irreversible. The process took less than 15 minutes. Click. Done. The scaffolding holding up their extravagant life had been sawed through. The largest piece of their foundation was gone. The severance was so swift, so clean. It was almost anticlimactic. Yet, I felt a heavy, grim Satisfaktion. This was the first true act of honesty between us in years. Next, I moved to the green tabs Andrew's car, the sleek, black BMW he drove, which he loved to wax and talk about as a symbol of his hard work and success. I called the lease finance company. I explained, in vage corporate jargon, that the designated funding account had been retired, and all scheduled payments were to be rejected forthwith. This particular cut felt personal, a direct strike at the very source of Andrew's misplaced pride. He had used that car, funded by me, as a stage prop for his arrogance. Click. Terminated. He would soon have to face the cold reality that his status symbol was resting on borrowed time that had just run out. The most difficult folder was, predictably, the yellow tabs, the private school tuition, the insurance premiums, the medical costs. These weren't for Andrew's ego, they were for the security and future of my grandchildren. I paused, the cursor hovering over the tuition payment schedule. This was where the paternal instinct fought hardest against the engineer's resolve. I reasoned with the faint, pleading voice inside me. By paying these bills, I wasn't protecting my grandchildren. I was allowing their parents to avoid the difficult, necessary conversation about prioritization. I was preventing Caroline and Andrew from realizing that if they wanted their children in that expensive school, they would have to sacrifice the luxury car or the costly house, or both. They needed to learn to choose, taking a deep breath. I hit cancel on the tuition payment. The insurance and medical drafts followed immediately. And click. Click. The systematic dismantling continued for another hour, addressing every small, recurring expense I had assumed over the years. Each phone call, each key press, was a piece of my old burden dissolving, replaced by the heavy, anxious anticipation of their impending shock. I was emptying the life raft, forcing them to swim. I knew the call would come within hours, filled with tears, anger, and accusations. They wouldn't understand the why. They would only feel the immediate, paralyzing what I was steeling myself against the emotional impact. This wasn't an act of cruelty. It was an act of brutal, necessary love. The nearly $1 million I had poured into their lives had bought them comfort, but it had stripped them of character. I was the architect of their financial collapse. Yes, but only so they could finally become the builders of their own self-sufficient, resilient new world. The quiet of my study, broken only by the hum of the computer, felt like the calm before a very violent storm. I had dropped the $1 million anvil, and I was ready for the reverberations. The storm I anticipated arrived precisely at 9:15 a.m. It wasn't the distant rumble of thunder, it was the shrill, demanding ring of the phone. Cutting through the engineered quiet of my study, I looked at the caller ID Caroline. I let it ring 3 times. Taking a slow, steady breath, an anchor against the inevitable emotional deluge, I picked up on the 4th ring, my voice measured and calm, Hello, Caroline. Her voice, usually smooth and polite, was tight with panic, almost hysterical. It was the sound of a carefully constructed facade, crumbling in real time. Dad, what is going on? The bank called this morning. They said our monthly mortgage transfer was rejected. Rejected. And the bank manager was asking about irregular payment histories. What did you do? There it was. The immediate and visceral panic that financial reality always inflicts when the safety net vanishes. The carefully executed, surgical cancellations of the previous night had taken effect. I didn't do anything. Caroline, I replied, deliberately using the language of consequence rather than action. I simply followed through on what I told Andrew last night. I am no longer paying your bills. The line went silent for a moment. A pregnant pause, heavy with disbelief. When she spoke again, her voice was a desperate, pleading whisper, laced with sharp, involuntary tears. Dad, you can't be serious. That was just a fight. You don't actually stop helping us. We rely on you. We always have. That house. Dad, that's our home. We'll lose everything. How could you just cut it off without warning? The accusation without warning was what struck me most. I had spent 15 years warning them with my silence, with my sacrifice, with the unspoken truth that their lifestyle was unsustainable. And last night, I had given them the loudest, clearest warning possible. Caroline, I said, my voice hardening just slightly. The engineer's resolve returning. The warning was given at your dining table. The minute Andrew felt emboldened to call me a failure and a dependent, while resting his entire life on my financial cushion. The contract of silence was broken. I have been helping you, underwriting your life, for 15 years. 15 years is not just a fight. It is a pattern of dependency that needed to end. She started crying in earnest then, the sound raw and painful. But why now? Why do this to us? I know Andrew was an idiot. But you can't punish the children. What about their school? What about their health insurance? Do you want us to be out on the street? No. I don't want you on the street, I countered, though the very thought was agonizing. But I want you to start prioritizing. I want you to decide which of those things, the private school, the expensive house, the luxury car is truly essential, and which is an entitlement. For too long, you've had the illusion that everything was essential because I paid for it all. Andrew told me I was coasting. Caroline, but you two were drifting, and I was the current that kept you afloat. She confessed that she was working at the grocery store. But the income was barely enough for groceries and petrol. We've been barely scraping by. Dad, we were just waiting for Andrew's new salary to kick in. But it's not enough to cover the mortgage and all the rest. We thought you would always be there. That is the core of the problem. Caroline, I stated, recognizing the painful, honest confession in her voice. You thought I would always be there, and as long as I was the permanent safety net, you had no incentive to build your own bridge. Your dependence allowed Andrew to remain arrogant and allowed you to avoid facing the true scale of your commitments. The raw panic in her voice was the sound of reality finally breaking through. It was ugly, frightening, and necessary. It was the sound of my daughter finally feeling the weight of the life she had chosen. I felt the sharp edges of my resolve soften just enough to deliver a final, painful promise. I will not abandon you as a father, I concluded, but I have abandoned my role as your bank. You and Andrew need to sit down, look at your bills, and decide what to do next. You have been adults for 15 years. And now you must start acting like it. This is your life, Caroline. And now, you finally have to own it. I hung up the phone, the silence returning, heavier than before. The first barrage was over. But the war for their self-respect had only just begun. I was prepared to weather the storm. I had to be. Their future depended on it. The line went dead, leaving a silence far more profound than the one before the storm. Caroline's tears and panic still resonated in the air, a visceral testament to the shockwaves I had unleashed. But the engineer in me understood that demolition is only the first step. The true task is reconstruction. They were currently standing in the rubble of their old life, and I couldn't simply let them suffocate there. The ensuing 3 days were a blur of unanswered texts from Andrew Pithy, furious, and filled with demands rather than questions, and shorter, more desperate calls from Caroline, listing the mounting catastrophes. The car finance company had contacted Andrew. The private school had sent a terse email. The illusion was officially shattered. My response to Andrew was complete, cold silence. He needed to understand that his bluster and entitlement held zero currency with me now. But I knew I couldn't abandon Caroline entirely. She was the one showing the first, faint signs of accepting reality. On the 4th day, I called her back, not in response to a plea, but on my own terms. Caroline, I started, keeping my tone level and firm, like a seasoned contractor, laying down the law. I hear the fear in your voice, and I understand the panic. But I need you to understand one thing. The safety net is gone. It will not be replaced. She started to interrupt, a fresh wave of panic rising, but I cut her off gently. Listen to me. I did not make this decision to be cruel. I made it because my financial assistance had become a corrosive force. It taught Andrew arrogance, and it taught you dependency. It prevented both of you from ever truly growing up and owning your choices. But what do? Dad, we can't pay the mortgage. We can't pay the tuition. We're going to lose everything, she whispered, the panic now edged with defeat. You won't lose everything, I corrected. You will lose the things you cannot afford, and you will keep the things you choose to fight for. This is where you draw the line. Caroline, this is where you learn to prioritize. I laid out my new terms, a new blueprint for their independence. First, I am giving you 30 days. 30 days to look at your financial situation with complete, brutal honesty. Andrew must sit with you, and you must review every single expense. No more hiding behind my bank account. You will see the truth of what you earn versus what you spend. Second, I continued, emphasizing the gravity of the change. I will not give you money, but I will offer my engineering advice. I can help you analyze your budget, your debt-to-income ratio, and your best options for moving forward. Do you sell the house? Do you trade in the BMW for something affordable? Those decisions are yours. But I can help you map out the most sustainable structural solution. There was a long silence on the line, but this time, it wasn't a silence of panic. It was the silence of hard, unwelcome realization. She was absorbing the fact that the handouts were over, but a new, more valuable form of support was being offered, mentorship. Finally, she spoke, her voice still shaky, but carrying the first note of resolve I had heard in years. Okay, Dad, 30 days. We have to look at everything. Andrew is furious. He won't even speak to me properly. But I can't let us fall apart. I need to figure this out. Then start figuring it out. Caroline. I encouraged, a genuine warmth entering my voice for the first time. The first step is always the hardest. You and Andrew need to understand the difference between need and want. You need to learn how to stand on your own 2 feet, not as my daughter, but as a fully capable, self-reliant adult. And I promise you, that foundation will be stronger than any structure I ever designed. The conversation ended with a measured, "I love you" from her, which felt heavier and more real than any platitude she had offered during the years I was funding her life. I had established the boundary, provided the tools, and stepped back. The ultimate test was no longer mine, but theirs. I had forced them into the forge of self-reliance, and now I had to wait and see if they would emerge as tempered steel or remain brittle glass. The 30-day countdown had begun. The initial 30-day deadline I had imposed was not a random number. It was an engineering tolerance, the maximum stress the structure could handle before collapse, or in this case, before decisive action was required. After our last conversation, a fragile, brittle quiet descended. Andrew, in his rage and wounded pride, refused to speak to me, which was precisely the space I needed. Caroline, however, began to engage, hesitantly at first. Then, with increasing urgency, our interactions became structured, mirroring a mentorship more than a father-daughter chat. She would call, not to beg, but to report on the state of the project, her life. She was forced to confront the ledger I had once managed in secret. "Dad," she reported one evening, her voice tired, but devoid of hysteria. We looked at the numbers. Andrew's new salary. It's high, but when you factor in the mortgage, the car lease, and the tuition, we're running a deficit of nearly $4,000 a month. We've been bleeding money for years. It was the first time she had used the word "we" in connection with the deficit. She was taking ownership. And what is the structural conclusion? Caroline, I asked, maintaining my professional distance, forcing her to be the analyst. The structural conclusion is that the house is a liability, not an asset, she admitted, the words sounding bitter on her tongue. Andrew fought me for 3 days, insisting we could refinance, but the bank won't touch us with our current debt. He finally agreed that we have to sell the BMW. We listed it this afternoon. That was the first crack in Andrew's armor, the forced liquidation of his status symbol. It wasn't my doing. It was the inevitable, natural consequence of his unsustainable choices. He had worshipped that car. It was the glossy veneer over his insecurity. Selling it was the first real, painful taste of humility. Over the next few weeks, I watched and occasionally advised as they underwent the painful process of financial triage. Caroline started working double shifts at the grocery store, no longer viewing it as pocket money, but as essential income. She was exhausted, but her energy was focused, not frantic. She was contributing. Andrew, humbled by the threat of losing everything and the realization that his new 6-figure success was a paper tiger, swallowed his pride and took on a high-paying, but notoriously tedious, contract job in database management, a job he previously would have deemed beneath him. He was trading the vanity of prestige for the reality of solvency. They were learning to make choices. I learned that they had pulled the children out of the expensive private school. It broke our hearts. "Dad," Caroline confessed, "but they're adjusting well to the public school. And honestly, the time we spend helping them with homework now feels more valuable than the money we spent before." She was learning the true definition of value. The most telling change was in their communication. When I helped them draft a truly brutal household budget, listing every expenditure from coffee to clothing, Caroline mentioned something pivotal. Andrew and I actually talked for 3 hours last night. Dad, not about superficial stuff, but about our future. We argued, but then we decided together what we could live without. We never did that before. We just spent. The forced sobriety of their situation was rebuilding their partnership on a foundation of shared reality. One afternoon, Caroline called, and the tone of her voice was different, reflective, almost clinical. We sold the BMW today. We bought an old, reliable Honda CR-V, used. It's practical. Dad, it smells a little like stale coffee. But it runs, and there's no payment, just insurance. I paused, absorbing the depth of that sacrifice, the shedding of arrogance for pragmatism. It was a tangible, material representation of their growth. The BMW was Andrew's pretense. The used Honda was their commitment. That, Caroline, I said, a deep, genuine pride warming my tone, is the sound of true success. You are making hard, responsible choices. You are learning to distinguish between what society tells you to want and what you actually need to build a future. They were no longer victims of my withdrawal. They were the protagonists of their own rescue. They were standing in the wreckage. Yes, but they were cleaning up, budgeting, sacrificing, and, most importantly, communicating. The storm had been terrifying, but the clearing skies revealed something far more solid than the illusion I had once maintained. The transition from dependency to self-reliance was underway. The sale of the BMW, followed by the purchase of the reliable, used Honda, was a powerful material sign of their commitment to change. It was a victory of pragmatism over pretense. Yet, I knew the structural work wasn't complete until the emotional foundation, the deeply buried guilt and resentment, was addressed. The breakthrough came a Saturday morning. A few weeks after the car switch, the phone rang, and I braced myself for another budget report. But when I answered, Caroline's voice was different, soft, hesitant, and entirely unlike the urgent, frantic tone I had grown accustomed to. Dad, can we talk? Not about the numbers. Not about the house listings. Just talk. I need to see you. I agreed immediately. I knew this was the moment the emotional scaffolding would either be tested or finally built. She arrived later that afternoon. Unaccompanied. She sat in my living room, not on the edge of the seat as she had for months, but settled back, clutching a worn coffee mug. She didn't start with excuses or complaints. The first thing she did was look me in the eye, and the look wasn't one of accusation or fear, but of profound, exhausted honesty. I came here to apologize, she began, her voice thick with emotion. Not just for Andrew's horrible words at dinner. He's his own problem. I need to apologize for my silence, for my complicity, for 15 years of just letting you carry the weight and pretending that we weren't drowning. She took a shaky breath. I was terrified. Dad, terrified of the reality, terrified of what it meant if Andrew's big plan didn't work out. So, as long as I knew you were secretly patching the holes, I allowed us to live in this state of convenient denial. I was too comfortable being your little girl who never had to face the adult world, and I let you pay for that comfort. It was a confession that cut through years of polite pretense. She was admitting her deliberate choice to stay small, to live within the bubble of entitlement I had created. She was finally taking responsibility for her role in the dysfunction. And then you pulled the plug, she continued, a faint, rueful smile touching her lips. I was angry. So angry. I thought you were abandoning us. But now, after looking at the spreadsheets and working those double shifts, I think it was the most loving thing you could have done. The best thing you ever gave us was not the money, but the courage to stand on our own. Her words validated the agonizing path I had chosen. She was recognizing that the true gift of a parent is not the absence of struggle, but the capacity for resilience. Andrew is still angry, mostly at himself, and at the world for not recognizing his genius, she admitted wryly. But even he is different. He's working harder than ever, and for the first time, he doesn't talk about getting rich quick. He talks about earning a stable income. He's looking at me, his partner, not just his wife who stays home. He respects my contribution now that he sees how hard I'm working at the store. Then, she voiced the fear that had underpinned everything, the fear of my disapproval. I think the worst part was the fear of disappointing you. I thought if we struggled, you'd think I was a failure. That's why I let you keep paying to maintain the illusion of success in your eyes. I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. To the physical connection, a replacement for the financial one. Caroline, my disappointment was never about your financial situation. It was about your loss of dignity, your loss of self-respect. My pride is not in the size of your bank account. It's in the strength of your character. And you are showing more character now, negotiating with creditors and working double shifts, than you ever did living in that $1,000,000 fantasy. I don't want to need you like that anymore. Dad, she stated, her voice quiet but firm. I want to be the one who can offer you help someday. I want to build my own life so strong that I can be your net, not the other way around. I looked at my daughter, truly seeing her as a mature, striving woman for the first time in years. This conversation was the catharsis we both needed, an essential emotional repair that was worth more than all the canceled checks combined. The scaffolding was down, and the strong, independent structure of Caroline's spirit was finally emerging. The next stage of their independence, the permanent relocation, was already taking shape in the backdrop of this new, hard-won emotional truth. The emotional breakthrough with Caroline, her genuine apology, and the recognition that my abandonment was an act of profound love, felt like the internal structure was finally sound. But a house built on truth still needs a solid financial foundation. The conversation about her growth and Andrew's newfound humility was the necessary preamble to the biggest, hardest practical step, resolving the issue of the house. A few days later, Caroline called again. The sentimentality of our previous talk was gone, replaced by a steely, almost clinical resolve. We're selling the house. Dad, she announced. It wasn't a question or a plea for advice. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the quiet authority of an executive, making a final decision. That house, the one I had secretly maintained for 15 years, the one I had poured over $500,000 into to prop up the illusion of their success. It wasn't just wood and drywall. It was the symbol of their financial overreach, the trophy of Andrew's ego, and the expensive comfort of Caroline's denial. It's the only way. Isn't it? She asked, immediately answering her own question. We ran the numbers after our talk. Even with Andrew's new contract and my promotion, the mortgage is a liability, not an asset. It consumes too much of our combined income. We'd be surviving, not building. The numbers dictate the structure. Caroline, I replied, the engineer in me appreciating her objective assessment. That house required a level of income you simply do not have. And it generated a deficit that was consuming your future. Selling it is not a defeat. It is a declaration of fiscal responsibility. She explained the agonizing process of convincing Andrew. Initially, he was incandescent with wounded pride. He saw selling the house as a public acknowledgement of his failure. The ultimate humiliation after his years of bragging. He saw it as my victory. He kept saying, "We can't let your father win. We can't let him see us fail. We have to refinance," Caroline recounted, her voice sounding weary from the fight. But I finally just held up the budget, the one you helped us draft. And I asked him, "Andrew, who are you trying to impress? The bank is coming, and your father is simply letting reality happen. We are not failing him. We are failing ourselves by clinging to this lie and waiting for foreclosure." It was that clarity, that moment when she shifted the frame from my father's punishment to our self-betrayal, that broke through Andrew's ego. He realized the alternative was not keeping the house, but losing it in a humiliating, financially destructive foreclosure. He chose the strategic retreat, the responsible sale, over the forced, damaging loss. The process of selling was swift and unsentimental. They cleaned, decluttered, and hosted open houses. Caroline managed the logistics, fielding calls from realtors and negotiating the price. The irony was palpable. The house I had covertly bought her 15 years ago was the very thing she now had to bravely sell to save her family. "It's hard, Dad," she admitted one evening, a fragile quality in her voice. "This is where the kids grew up. This is where we brought Emma home from the hospital. All those memories, they're being wrapped up and packed away." I allowed myself a moment of genuine paternal sympathy. "The memories don't live in the walls, Caroline. They live in your family. And you are doing the hardest, bravest thing a parent can do. You are sacrificing comfort for stability. You are prioritizing the well-being of your future over the sentimentality of your past." The house sold quickly. The proceeds, after clearing the remaining mortgage and some accumulated debt, left them with a modest but essential cushion. More importantly, it left them free of the crippling debt that had defined their adult lives. They were financially liberated for the first time since their wedding day. This decision wasn't just a transaction, it was a watershed moment. It signaled the complete collapse of the entitled, dependent lifestyle I had funded. They had faced the most visible symbol of their failure and made the mature choice. Andrew, though still humbled, was now actively engaged in the process, viewing the sale as a strategic financial move rather than a forced retreat. This act of self-liquidation was the final, undeniable proof that they were ready. They were no longer victims waiting for a savior. They were survivors making tough, irresponsible, executive decisions. The financial structure of their old life had been fully dismantled, clearing the ground for the entirely new foundation they were about to build. The groundwork for their final, bold move, a fresh start somewhere completely new, was now firmly in place. The successful sale of the house was not merely a transaction. It was the final, irreversible structural failure, of their old, entitled life, and it liberated them completely from crippling debt. With the financial wreckage cleared, Caroline and Andrew found themselves in the unique, frightening position of having true freedom to choose a life that was sustainable, not just times aspirational. It was Caroline who presented the new blueprint, a plan conceived entirely by their joint, hard-won efforts, without a single consultation with me for money. "We're moving to Vancouver. Dad," she announced one crisp autumn afternoon over the phone. Her voice held a note of exciting, almost giddy determination, a stark contrast to the whispered fear of a few months ago. I paused, absorbing the depth and distance of the decision. Vancouver was a different world, hundreds of miles away, offering a clean slate, a genuine removal from the ghosts of their past and the shadow of my influence. Vancouver, I asked, allowing genuine surprise into my voice. That's quite a move. Why there? It's a fresh start, she explained, the words tumbling out quickly. We've sold the house, liquidated the expensive car, and the kids are settled in their new, affordable school. We realize that if we stay here, every street corner, every friend's house, every memory is tied to the debt and the expectations we couldn't meet. We need to be somewhere where we asterisk build our life from the ground up, on our own terms, asterisk. She explained the logistics with the competence of a seasoned project manager. Andrew had secured a better-paying tech position in Vancouver, one that was asterisk stable and promised real growth, asterisk, without the unrealistic salary expectations of our city. Crucially, the job offer was his alone, no recommendations or gentle inquiries from me. Caroline had secured a managerial role at a local co-op grocery store, a promotion that felt asterisk earned and solid asterisk. A reward for the tireless work ethic she had rediscovered. We found a small, 2-bedroom apartment near Andrew's job, she said proudly. Nothing fancy, but we can pay the rent easily with our combined salaries. We looked at the budget. Dad! And for the first time, the columns, asterisk match asterisk. We're not just surviving, we're times, solvents, asterisk. This was the ultimate validation of my decision. They weren't just reacting to the crisis, they were asterisk, proactively planning a future free from dependence, asterisk. They were using their own ingenuity and labor to solve their problems, a far more valuable asset than any inheritance I could bestow. And this time, Caroline added, her voice softening with genuine commitment, it's all on us. No hidden accounts. No backup plan that involves your checkbook. We are going there to prove to ourselves and to Andrew's pride that we can do this, asterisk, independently, completely. Andrew, who rarely spoke to me unless strictly required, got on the line briefly. His tone was subdued, respectful, stripped bare of the old arrogance. We appreciate your advice, Samuel, he said, avoiding any mention of the money or the fight. We need to do this. We need to be able to look at the kids and say, we built this life for you, asterisk, all by ourselves, asterisk. It was an admission of his own profound need for asterisk, self-respect, asterisk, and earned dignity. Andrew's journey had been the steepest, from unwarranted pride to forced humility, and now, finally, to earned pride. I knew this geographical move was critical. The distance would enforce the final, necessary emotional boundary. They couldn't just drop by for a casual request for a loan or a little help with a repair. They would have to solve their own problems, rely on their own community, and manage their own crises. I think this is an excellent asterisk, structurally sound plan, asterisk. Caroline, I told her, my heart swelling with a quiet, profound sense of accomplishment. It requires courage to walk away from the familiar, but you are creating your own clean slate. You are building a new foundation from scratch. I offered no money, no parting gift, just my blessing and my genuine admiration. The next few weeks were a flurry of packing and organizing. Every box they taped up, every piece of furniture they shed, was a symbolic asterisk, shedding of the old, unsustainable life. Asterisk, Asterisk. The move to Vancouver wasn't just a change of address. It was the final, definitive step in their transition to responsible adulthood. They were not running away from financial failure. They were moving asterisk, asterisk toward earned success. Asterisk, asterisk. I was finally, truly, letting them go. And the relief I felt was immense. A relief that came from knowing I had done my job. Not as a provider, but as a asterisk, asterisk teacher of life's hardest, most essential lesson. Asterisk, asterisk. The decision to move to Vancouver was the ultimate act of self-determination. The final, clean break from the old cycle of dependency. It represented a bold step into the terrifying, exhilarating unknown. It was one thing to make that choice on paper. It was another to watch them physically leave. The day they departed was clear and sharp, the kind of brisk autumn morning that feels full of possibility. I stood on the curb of their old, soon-to-be someone else's house, watching the professional movers finish loading the truck. Andrew had been meticulous about organizing the move, a clear sign that he was fully invested in this new, self-reliant project. What remained was only the essential core of their family and the modest necessities for their new, sensible apartment. Caroline walked over to me, wearing a practical sweater and jeans, her face scrubbed clean, looking more genuine and beautiful than she had in years. The anxious edge in her eyes had been replaced by a quiet, sustainable strength. "The Honda is packed," she announced, referring to the reliable, used CR-V that replaced Andrew's leased BMW. "The kids are buckled in, excited about the ferry ride." I nodded, unable to speak for a moment, the lump in my throat tight with a confusing mixture of pride and sorrow. She reached out and took my hand, squeezing it firmly. "I don't know how to thank you for everything, Dad, for the help you gave us for so long, but most importantly, for letting us go. You don't need to thank me, Caroline." I managed, my voice rough. "You did this on your own. You made the hard choices. You sold the house. You traded the car. You built the budget. I simply gave you the consequence. And you provided the solution. I am proud of the woman and the mother you have become." She leaned in and hugged me tightly. A long, meaningful embrace that felt infinitely more real than any we had shared during the years of my financial subsidy. "I promise we'll send pictures, but we're going to be okay. We know we will, because we have each other, and we know how to fight for it now." Then, Andrew approached, carrying a small backpack. He wasn't swaggering, or nervously avoiding my gaze. He looked like a man who had been through a crucible, humbled, weary, and deeply focused. "Samuel," he said, using my name with a new, sober respect. "I owe you an apology that words can't cover. I realize now that I was calling you a failure because I was terrified of being one myself. Thank you for forcing us to grow up. We are going to Vancouver to prove to ourselves that we are capable of building this life without a safety net." He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was stating a fact about his own future, and I accepted it as the most profound kind of amends. "Good luck, Andrew," I replied. "Go build something that lasts." I watched them get into the small Honda, the children waving wildly from the back seat. Caroline gave me one last tearful smile and a wave, and then they pulled away, driving toward the highway, toward the ferry, toward the immense, terrifying, and exhilarating unknown of Vancouver. I stood there long after the car vanished, a solitary figure on an empty curb. The house was locked up, silent, The chapter was closed. As I drove home, my mind was not on the $1 million I had spent, nor the $1 million I had ultimately saved. It was on the enduring truth of the past few months. I had forced them into the fire, and they had emerged tempered steel. I had finally understood the fundamental error in my engineering of their lives. I had believed that love meant providing, protecting, and preempting pain. I thought that shielding Caroline from financial struggle was the ultimate measure of my success as a father. But by doing so, I had inadvertently robbed her and Andrew of their most crucial developmental milestones, the ability to prioritize the necessity of teamwork, and the deep satisfaction of earned accomplishment. The greatest gift I could have given them was not a life free of struggle, but the tools to face those struggles with resilience and self-respect. I learned that my role was not to eliminate their difficulty, but to nurture their capacity to overcome it. My silence had bought their dependency. My decisive action had purchased their independence. I forced them to fall, and in doing so, I got to witness them rise again. They sold the trophy, embraced the burden, and chose a path defined by their own labor and their own merit. They were going to Vancouver not with my money, but with their own hard-won character. The hardest part of love is knowing when to let go, when to swap the safety net for the blueprint, and trust that the foundation you instilled in their youth is strong enough for them to build the rest themselves. And watching that small Honda drive away, I knew with absolute certainty that the most valuable structure I had ever engineered was the framework for their own self-reliance. It was finally complete. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.